My job description doesn't mention paranormal activity specialist, but it might as well. Every night, I face more than just inmates. I face the lingering terror of what's supposed to be empty cells. Come with me on a night shift where the chilling atmosphere and the truly bizarre rules I must obey will make you question what's real. The Blackwood Correctional Facility had been abandoned for 15 years before the state decided to reopen it. Budget cuts, they said, a necessary evil. The newer facilities were overcrowded, and this crumbling monument to Victorian-era punishment would have to do. I needed the job. Fresh out of the academy, no experience, and student loans that kept me awake at night. The pay was good, suspiciously good for a glorified babysitting gig. I should have known better. My first day started at sunset. The October sky was bruising purple when I pulled into the parking lot, my decade-old sedan looking pathetic next to the armored transport vehicles. The prison rose before me like a diseased tooth, all gray stone and narrow windows that seemed to watch rather than simply exist. Razor wire crowned the perimeter walls, glinting dully in the fading light. The air smelled wrong. Not just the usual institutional blend of bleach and despair, but something older, something that had been rotting for a very long time. Inside, the administration building felt temporarily alive. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the heating system clanked and groaned like an old man's joints. Captain Rodriguez waited for me in his office, a cramped space that smelled of coffee and cigarette smoke despite the no-smoking signs plastered everywhere. He was in his 50s, with gray temples and eyes that had seen too much. When he looked at me, I felt assessed and found wanting. "You're Bennett, right? The new night officer." His voice was gravel and exhaustion. "Yes, sir. Evan Bennett, reporting for duty." He didn't smile. "You ever worked nights before?" "No, sir. But I'm a quick learner. That's what they all say." He pulled out a folder, yellowed and water-stained at the edges. "This facility has some particularities. The day shift handles the active population, about 200 inmates in the East Wing. Your concern is the West Wing, administrative segregation, protective custody, and the old cell blocks. The empty ones." His jaw tightened. "They're supposed to be empty. Decommissioned pending renovation that'll probably never happen. Your job is to do rounds, check the locks, monitor the security systems, and make sure everything stays contained." The pause before that last word made my skin prickle. He handed me the folder. Inside were standard protocols, radio check-ins every hour, emergency procedures, evacuation routes. But paperclipped to the back was a single sheet, printed on different paper, in a different font. The header read, "Supplementary Guidelines for Night Operations." "What's this?" I asked. "Additional rules. Non-negotiable. You follow them exactly, every single night. No exceptions. No creative interpretation. These rules exist for a reason, Bennett. They were written in blood and sanity. Do you understand me?" I didn't, but I nodded anyway. "Read them now. Memorize them. If you can't handle it, walk away now. No judgment. But once you accept this position, you're committed." I scanned the list. Some rules seemed reasonable, if overly specific. Others made no sense at all. A few contradicted basic safety protocols I'd learned at the academy. Rule 1. Always keep the lights on in cell block C, no matter what. If the lights go out, leave immediately and radio for assistance. Do not attempt to restore power yourself. Rule 2. If you hear a child crying, never investigate. Continue your rounds as if you heard nothing. Children do not belong in this facility. Rule 3. Do not respond to call buttons after 2 a.m. from cell block A. The cells are empty. Whatever presses those buttons is not an inmate. Rule 4. If an inmate in protective custody asks you to deliver a message to the man in the corner, decline politely. Do not look at the corners of the cell. Do not ask questions. Rule 5. The showers in the North Wing operate on a timer. They turn on at 3:17 a.m. and run for exactly 3 minutes. This is normal. Do not enter the shower room during this time. Rule 6. If you see someone in an orange jumpsuit in the decommissioned blocks, do not engage. Walk away calmly. They cannot follow you past a green line painted on the floor. Rule 7. The door to cell 237 must remain closed and locked at all times. You will check this lock during every round. If you ever find it open, evacuate the facility immediately and call the number written at the bottom of this page. Rule 8. Trust your instinct. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Do not let curiosity override your survival instinct. I looked up at Rodriguez. Sir, some of these don't make sense. The call buttons in Block A. If the cells are empty, why are the systems active? Because they are, he said flatly. Any other questions that matter? What's in cell 237? His face went pale. Actually pale, like I'd asked him to describe his own death. Nothing you ever want to meet. Just check the lock and move on. Every single time. Has anyone ever found it open? Once. Officer named David Marsh, about 6 years ago. He radioed it in, followed protocol, evacuated. Building was cleared, and a specialized team came in to resecure it. Marsh was never the same afterward. Quit 3 days later. Last I heard, he was in a psychiatric facility upstate. The official report said work-related stress. Rodriguez's eyes said the report was a lie. My mouth had gone dry. What really happened to him? He saw something that broke him. That's all you need to know. He stood, signaling the conversation was over. Your shift starts in 30 minutes. Officer Linda Hayes is waiting to show you the rounds. Learn fast, keep your head down, and follow the rules. Those rules are the only thing standing between you and whatever's in there with you. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to laugh it off as hazing, some elaborate prank to scare the new guy. But Rodriguez's face was stone serious, and his hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette despite the signs. One more thing, Bennett. He stopped me at the door. You're going to see things, hear things that'll make you question your sanity. When that happens, not if, when, remember that you're not crazy. This place is. Don't let it take you like it took the others. But he'd already turned away, staring out his window at the darkening prison yard where shadows were pooling like oil. I found Officer Hayes in the equipment room, a muscular woman in her 40s with silver streaking through her dark hair. She barely looked at me as she handed over a radio, flashlight, and a keyring heavy with old brass keys. You read the rules? She asked. Yes. Good. Stick to them like your life depends on it. Because it does. She led me down a corridor that smelled of mildew and something else. Something sweet and rotten. The facility has 3 wings. East is active population, not your problem. West is your patrol area. 3 cell blocks. A, B, and C. Block A is protective custody, 12 occupied cells. Block B is empty, pending demolition. Block C is administrative segregation, 8 inmates. Then there's the old section, the Victorian original. That's blocks D through F. Supposedly empty, but she trailed off. But what? She stopped walking and turned to face me, her eyes hard. But you'll do your rounds there anyway. You'll check every lock, shine your light into every cell, and you'll see things that shouldn't be there. Things that died decades ago, maybe centuries, and you'll follow every single rule on that sheet, or you'll end up like Marsh, or worse, like Officer Patricia Kim. What happened to her? Hayes' expression turned grim. She broke Rule 2, heard a child crying in Block D, thought maybe a kid had wandered in somehow, went to investigate. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. They found her 3 hours later, sitting in an empty cell, staring at the wall. She hasn't spoken a word since. That was 2 years ago. She's still in that psychiatric ward, still staring, still silent. But sometimes they say she smiles. And when she does, it's not her smile. It's something else wearing her face. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees. Come on, Hayes said, her voice deliberately casual now. Let me show you the control room. Your shift starts in 10 minutes. and you're going to want to know where everything is before the lights start playing tricks on you. As we walked deeper into Blackwood Correctional Facility, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not by cameras or fellow officers, but by something older and infinitely more patient, something that had been waiting in the darkness for someone new to arrive, something that already knew my name. The control room sat at the heart of the West Wing like a spider at the center of its web. Monitors lined the walls, displaying grainy black and white feeds from cameras scattered throughout the facility. Most showed exactly what you'd expect. Empty corridors, locked cell doors, the occasional rat scurrying across the floor. But some screens showed static, and others displayed images that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Hayes pointed to a large board covered in keys. Each block has a master key. You'll need them for your rounds. The red tag keys open the main security doors. The brass ones are for individual cells. You shouldn't need those unless there's an emergency in protective custody or ADSEG. In this, she held up a key that looked older than the facility itself, tarnished and covered in strange markings. Opens the door to the Victorian section. You'll use it twice per shift. Once at 11 p.m., once at 4 a.m. No more, no less. Why those specific times? She hung the key back on its hook with deliberate care. Because those are the times when they're quietest. Go during any other hour, and she shook her head. Just don't. Hayes spent the next 20 minutes walking me through procedures, radio protocols, emergency codes, the location of the panic buttons that were scattered throughout the facility like desperate prayers. She showed me the medication log for protective custody. Apparently, I'd be distributing prescribed medications through the cell door slots at midnight. The inmates in Block A and C know the rules too, she explained. They won't ask questions. They won't try to make conversation. If one of them does, if they act friendly or try to engage you, something's wrong. Report it immediately. What do you mean, something's wrong? Hayes' expression went cold. I mean, it's not the inmate talking. Now, you ready for your first round? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The West Wing corridor stretched before us, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes that hummed like dying wasps. Our footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, too loud in the oppressive silence. The walls were institutional green below and dirty white above, paint peeling in long strips that looked like dead skin. Block A came first. 12 cells, 6 on each side, with a narrow walkway between them. A few inmates were awake, sitting on their bunks or pacing in the tiny spaces. They didn't look at us as we passed. One man, elderly with salt and pepper hair, sat cross-legged on his bunk, lips moving in silent prayer. Another lay facing the wall, utterly still. Cell 9. Hayes whispered, "Watch this one." I looked into the cell as we passed. A young man, couldn't have been more than 25, sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the corner. Just staring, unblinking, at nothing. Derek Wilson, Hayes murmured. In protective custody because the other inmates tried to kill him. Said he was seeing things, talking to things. They thought he was possessed. He's been staring at that corner for 3 months now, day and night. Barely eats, barely sleeps. Just stares. At what? At whatever's standing there. He can see them. Most people can't. Consider yourself lucky if you're one of the blind ones. We finished the Block A round without incident. Hayes made me practice checking each cell, counting inmates, looking for anything unusual. Standard procedure, except for the crushing sense of wrongness that permeated everything. Block B was empty, just as she'd said. 12 cells with open doors, stripped bunks, nothing but shadows and dust. But as we walked through, I heard something. A whisper, too faint to make out words. Just the suggestion of a voice, speaking urgently about something important. Ignore it, Hayes said, noticing my hesitation. That's how it starts. First, you hear whispers. Then you start trying to understand them. Then you start responding. Don't take that first step. Block C was different. The lights here were brighter, almost painfully so. 8 cells, all occupied, all locked down tight. The inmates here didn't pace or pray. They sat rigid on their bunks, eyes forward, barely breathing. Their orange jumpsuits seemed too bright in the harsh light, almost glowing. Administrative segregation, Hayes explained. The worst of the worst. Or at least, that's what the paperwork says. Truth is, these men aren't here because they're dangerous to other inmates. They're here because they know too much, because they've seen too much. We keep them separate to keep them alive. One inmate, a massive man with tear tattoos tracking down his face, watched us pass. His lips moved, and I heard 2 words clearly. It's watching. Hayes gripped my arm and pulled me forward. Don't listen. Don't respond. Just keep moving. We exited Block C, and she checked her watch. 10:45. 15 minutes until your first round of the Victorian section. I'll take you through it once. After that, you're on your own. Understand? My mouth was dry. Yes. She led me to a door at the end of the west wing. Heavy steel painted the same institutional green as everything else. But this door was different. Older. The frame was original stone, and the locking mechanism looked like it belonged in a medieval dungeon. Hayes retrieved the tarnished key and paused before inserting it. Beyond this door is the original Blackwood prison, built in 1847, operational until 1983. Officially, it was closed due to structural concerns and inhumane conditions. Unofficially, there were incidents, deaths that couldn't be explained, disappearances. After the facility was decommissioned, they sealed this section. It's been empty for over 40 years. Then why do we patrol it? Because empty doesn't mean unoccupied. She turned the key, and the lock groaned like something in pain. The door swung inward on rusted hinges, releasing air that smelled of age and decay, and something else. Something that reminded me of hospitals and funeral homes. Remember the rules. Don't investigate any sounds. Don't look too closely at anything in the cells. And for God's sake, if you see someone in orange, do not engage. The corridor beyond was darker, lit only by scattered bulbs and wire cages. The floor was stone instead of concrete, worn smooth by more than a century of footsteps. Cell doors were solid iron, with small barred windows at eye level. The walls wept moisture, and somewhere in the distance, something dripped with metronomic regularity. Hayes moved forward, and I followed, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run. The cells we passed were empty. I could see that much through the small windows. Rusted bed frames, broken toilets, graffiti scratched into walls by desperate hands decades ago. Nothing unusual, if you didn't count the overwhelming sense that we were intruding somewhere we didn't belong. Then I heard it. A child's voice, high and clear, singing. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. My feet stopped moving. Hayes grabbed my shoulder hard enough to hurt. Remember Rule 2, she hissed. Children do not belong in this facility. Whatever you're hearing, it's not a child. Keep walking. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. The voice was coming from one of the cells ahead, playful and innocent. Everything in me wanted to look, wanted to help, wanted to investigate what a child was doing in this nightmare place. Hayes physically turned me away from the cell. Look at me, Bennett. Look at me, not there. That's what it wants. It wants you to look, to care, to investigate. That's how it gets you. Patricia Kim heard a child crying. She looked. She went into the cell to help. And the thing that was making those sounds wasn't a child at all. The singing stopped abruptly, replaced by silence so complete it hurt my ears. Then, soft and cold, I heard a different voice. An adult voice, female, coming from the same cell. Don't you want to help me? Don't you want to save me? Hayes pulled me forward, and we walked past the cell. I didn't look. I kept my eyes forward, but in my peripheral vision, I saw something standing at the bars of that cell. Something small, child-sized, but wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. Its proportions were off, its movements too fluid, and when it reached through the bars, its arms stretched far too long, fingers grasping at empty air. That's Block D, Hayes said once we clear the area. Block E is ahead. This is where most of the incidents occurred in the old days. Riots, murders, suicides. The execution chamber was in E block, along with death row. They hanged men here for decades before switching to the electric chair. Then they stopped executing altogether. But something in this block never got the memo. Block E was worse. The cells here felt malevolent, as if the walls themselves remembered every drop of blood, every scream, every death. I shined my flashlight into the first cell and immediately wished I hadn't. For just a moment, I saw a man hanging from a noose, feet kicking, face purple. I blinked, and the cell was empty. Just a rusted bed frame and shadows. Your eyes will play tricks on you, Hayes said, though her voice lacked conviction. Your brain trying to make sense of things it doesn't understand. Don't trust what you see. Trust the rules. We moved through Block E quickly, both of us eager to leave. I saw things in the corners of cells, shapes that didn't belong, movements that stopped when I looked directly at them. The temperature had dropped significantly, and I could see my breath misting in the flashlight beam. Finally, we reached Block F, the oldest section, Hayes explained. The original cells from 1847. Smaller, crueler, designed to break spirits as much as contain bodies. And at the end of this block, isolated from all the others, was cell 237. The door was different. Reinforced steel, modern lock, and painted bright red. Someone had added extra bolts, padlocks, and what looked like a bar welded across the frame. Compared to the ancient iron of the other cells, this door screamed that something terrible was being kept inside. Check the lock, Hayes instructed. That's all. Don't look through the window. Don't put your ear to the door. Don't try to communicate with whatever's inside. Just verify the lock is secure and move on. I approached the door, my flashlight beam shaking slightly. The lock was massive, brand new, definitely secure. I reached out to test it, and the moment my fingers touched the metal, I heard it. A voice from inside. Not speaking exactly. More like breathing words directly into my mind. Hello, Evan. I've been waiting for you. Ice flooded my veins. It knew my name. How did it know my name? Don't listen, Hayes snapped. Check the lock. Confirm it's secure. Then we leave. The lock was solid. Definitely locked. Nothing was getting through that door. But the voice continued, soft and persuasive. They told you not to look, didn't they? They told you not to ask questions. But don't you want to know, Evan? Don't you want to understand what you're really guarding? My hand was on the lock, but my eyes drifted toward the small window. Hayes yanked me backward with surprising strength. Rule 7, Bennett. Check the lock and move on. Don't give it anything. Not your attention, not your curiosity, not your name. But I already had my name. We retreated from cell 237, and I forced myself not to look back. But I could feel something watching me, something ancient and patient, something that had all the time in the world. Back in the control room, Hayes poured us both coffee from a pot that had been sitting too long. Your first round of the old section. How do you feel? Terrified. Good. That means your instincts are working. The day you stop being scared is the day you're in real danger. She checked the monitors, though her eyes seemed to avoid certain screens. You'll do that round twice per shift. 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., like I said. The rest of your time is spent in blocks A, B, and C. Every hour, full patrol, count inmates, check systems. At midnight, medication distribution. At 2 a.m., the call buttons in block, it will start going off. Ignore them. At 3:17, the showers in the north wing will activate. Stay away. At 4 a.m., your second Victorian round. At 6 a.m., day shift arrives and you're free. 8 hours, I said. I just have to survive 8 hours. Hayes smiled without humor. 5 nights a week, every week, for as long as you can stand it. Most people don't make it past the first month. Some don't make it past the first week. The longest serving night officer lasted 3 years before he transferred to maximum security in another state. Said he'd rather deal with murderers and gang members than spend another night in Blackwood. She stood, gathering her things. My shift ends now. Yours is just beginning. You have my radio number. If anything happens, anything beyond the normal weirdness, call immediately. Don't try to be brave. Don't try to handle it yourself. Some situations require the specialized team Rodriguez mentioned. They're on standby every night, just in case. In case of what? In case something gets out. In case a rule gets broken. In case cell 237 opens. She paused at the door. Good luck, Bennett. And remember, follow the rules, trust your gut, and never, ever look too closely at anything in this place. The moment you start understanding what's really happening here is the moment you're lost. Then she was gone, and I was alone in the control room with static-filled monitors and the weight of 8 hours stretching before me like an eternity. The clock on the wall read 11:30 p.m. My next round was in 30 minutes. I watched the monitors, trying to spot anything unusual, but the camera showed only empty corridors and locked cells. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Except in one monitor, the one showing Block E. There, just for a moment, I saw a figure in an orange jumpsuit standing in the middle of the corridor. Standing exactly where no one should be. I blinked, and the corridor was empty again. The radio crackled. Control, this is Gate 1. Everything okay in there? You're being awful quiet. I picked up the radio, my voice steadier than I felt. Control here. All clear. Just learning the ropes. Copy that. Stay alert, rookie. And remember, if you need help, call. Pride's got more people hurt in this place than ghosts ever did. I wasn't sure I agreed with that assessment, but I acknowledged and set the radio down. The clock ticked forward. 11:45. 15 minutes until my next Victorian round. 15 minutes to steel myself for walking back into that darkness. Past that singing child that wasn't a child. Past those cells where men had died badly. Past cell 237 and whatever knew my name. My coffee had gone cold, but I drank it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. The facility was silent except for the hum of equipment and the distant drip of water. No screams, no crying, no whispers, but somehow the silence was worse than any sound could have been, because silence meant something was waiting, watching, biding its time until I made a mistake, broke a rule, or simply got unlucky. And in Blackwood Correctional Facility, luck was in very short supply. The clock struck midnight with a harsh electronic beep that made me jump. Medication time for the protective custody inmates in Block. Hayes had left me a lockbox with pre-measured doses in small paper cups, each labeled with his cell number and inmate name. 7 inmates total requiring midnight medications. The others either didn't need them or took theirs during day shift. I loaded the cups onto a small tray and made my way to Block A. The corridor felt different at midnight. The fluorescent lights seemed dimmer, the shadows deeper. My footsteps echoed with a hollow sound that suggested the floor beneath me was less solid than it should be. The first 3 cells went smoothly. I approached each door, announced the medication, slid the cup through the slot, and waited for the inmate to take it and return the empty cup. No words exchanged. No eye contact. Just a transaction completed in silence. Cell 4 belonged to a man named James Porter. According to the notes, he was in protective custody after testifying against the prison gang. When I approached his door and looked through the barred window, he was sitting on his bunk, staring at the wall. Normal enough, except his lips were moving rapidly, forming words I couldn't hear. Medication, Porter, I announced, sliding the cup through the slot. He didn't respond, kept staring at the wall, kept mouthing silent words. Porter, I need you to take your medication. Still nothing. I checked the protocol sheet Hayes had given me. If an inmate refused medication, I was to note it in the log and report it during the next radio check-in. Simple enough. But as I started to pull the cup back, Porter suddenly moved. He stood, crossed to the door in 3 strides, and pressed his face against the bars. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, and sweat beaded his forehead despite the cold. "It knows you're here," he whispered. "It's been talking about you all day, saying your name, Evan Bennett, over and over. It's so excited you're here. Fresh meat, it says. Fresh soul." My blood turned to ice water. "Take your medication, Porter. You can't hear it yet, can you? But you will. Give it time. It'll start with whispers. Then it'll show you things. Then it'll start touching you. Just little things at first. A brush against your arm. A cold breath on your neck. And then, when you're used to it, when you stop jumping at every little thing, that's when it'll really get you." Step back from the door. But Porter wasn't listening. His eyes had lost focus, looking through me rather than at me. "I can see it right now. It's standing behind you. So tall its head brushes the ceiling. It doesn't have a face, but it's smiling anyway. Can't you feel it? Can't you feel it breathing on you?" Every hair on my body stood up. The temperature had dropped, and my breath misted in front of my face. Against every instinct, I fought the urge to turn around. "Take your medication, Porter. Now." He snatched the cup, swallowed the pills dry, and thrust the cup back through the slot. Then he retreated to his bunk, returning to his wall-staring, lip-moving routine as if the conversation had never happened. I continued the medication round, but Porter's words echoed in my mind. "It knows you're here. It's been talking about you all day. The thing in cell 237? It had to be. But how could it talk to the inmates? The cell was isolated, secured, impossibly locked. Nothing should be getting out. Unless it didn't need to get out. Unless it could reach minds regardless of physical barriers." I finished the medication distribution and returned to the control room. The clock read 12:47 a.m. More than an hour until my next Victorian round. I tried to focus on the monitors, on normal procedures, on anything except the growing certainty that something was fundamentally wrong with this place. The radio crackled. "Control, this is Gate 1. Radio check. Control here. All clear. Copy that. How's your first night treating you?" "Quiet," I lied. "That's usually good. Although," he paused, "sometimes quiet is worse. Means they're planning something. Stay sharp." Acknowledged. I set the radio down and rubbed my eyes. The fatigue was setting in, that peculiar middle-of-the-night exhaustion where your body knows it should be sleeping. But sleep was out of the question. I had 6 more hours to go. At 1:15 a.m., something changed on the monitors. In Block B, the supposedly empty block, a cell door swung open. I watched it happen in real time on the grainy feed. Just opened, as if someone had pushed it from inside. Protocol said to investigate any anomaly, but I remembered Hayes' warning about that block. The whispers I'd heard during the last round. The feeling of wrongness that permeated everything. I picked up the radio. "Control to Gate 1. I have a door open in Block B, Cell 7. Advise." Silence. Then, "Did you see it open, or was it already open?" I saw it open. On the monitor. Just now. More silence. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. "Sometimes doors open in B block. Old building, settling foundation, faulty locks. If you didn't see anyone go in or come out, log it and leave it. Don't investigate. B block is scheduled for demolition next year. Whatever's in there can stay in there until the wrecking balls arrive. But what if? Bennett, listen to me carefully. Do not go into that cell. Do not go near that cell. There's a reason B block is empty. There's a reason we're tearing it down instead of renovating it. Some places should be left alone. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Anything else to report?" I thought about telling him about Porter, about the thing supposedly standing behind me, about the voice from cell 237. But what would I say? That an inmate said scary things? That I was spooked by my imagination? Negative. All clear. Stay alert. 2 a.m. is coming up. Remember Rule 3. I did remember. Do not respond to call buttons after 2 a.m. from Block A. The cells are empty. Whatever presses those buttons is not an inmate. But Block A wasn't empty. I just distributed medications there an hour ago. 7 occupied cells. Living, breathing inmates who might have legitimate emergencies. Unless empty meant something else entirely. At 1:58 a.m., I watched the clock like a prisoner awaiting execution. My palms were sweating despite the cold. The monitors showed nothing unusual. Block A was quiet. The inmates were either sleeping or sitting in their cells, lost in thought or medication-induced haze. 2 a.m. arrived with that same electronic beep. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. I started to think maybe this night would be different. Maybe the rules didn't apply every single time. Then the call button for cell 3 illuminated on the control panel. A buzzing sound accompanied it, insistent and demanding. The monitor showed cell 3 clearly. An empty bunk, an empty floor, an empty cell. But I've been in that cell hours ago. An inmate named Patrick Torres had been sitting on that bunk, taking his medication. Where is he now? The call button continued buzzing. Then cell 5 lit up. Then cell 9, Derek Wilson's cell, the one where he stared at the corner. Then cell 11. Within a minute, every single call button in Block A was activated, all buzzing simultaneously in a discordant chorus that set my teeth on edge. The monitors showed empty cells. All of them. Every bunk unoccupied. Every floor bare. Block A, which had held 12 inmates 30 minutes ago, was completely empty. My hand reached for the radio automatically. This had to be a malfunction. The cameras had to be wrong. I needed to do a visual check, confirm the inmates were actually there, prove to myself that this was just a technical glitch. But Rule 3 echoed in my mind. Do not respond to call buttons after 2 a.m. Whatever presses those buttons is not an inmate. My hand hovered over the radio. The call buttons continued their insistent buzzing, a noise that wormed into my skull and made it hard to think. I looked at the monitors again, and for just a moment, just a fraction of a second, I saw something. Figures standing at the cell doors. Not inmates. Not people. Tall and possibly thin, with limbs that bent wrong and faces that were holes in reality. They pressed the call buttons with fingers that had too many joints, and they stared at the cameras with eyes that didn't exist. I blinked, and the monitors showed empty cells again. But the call buttons continued buzzing for another 3 minutes, and I sat frozen in my chair, afraid that if I moved, if I responded, those things would know exactly where I was. At 2:03 a.m., the buzzing stopped. The call buttons went dark. The monitors showed sleeping inmates back in their cells, as if they'd never left. Cell 3 showed Patrick Torres on his bunk, lying on his side facing the wall. Cell 9 showed Derek Wilson sitting cross-legged, still staring at his corner. Everything was normal, as if the last 3 minutes had never happened. I checked the log. According to the system, no call buttons had been pressed. No alerts had been triggered. The timestamp showed 2:03 a.m., but there was no record of anything unusual. My hands were shaking as I wrote in the physical logbook. 2:03 a.m. All clear. Block A inmates accounted for. The radio remained silent. Gatewin didn't call for check-in. Either he knew what happened at 2 a.m., or he was deliberately giving me space to process it alone. I suspected the former. I needed to move. Needed to do something normal to convince myself I was still tethered to reality. I made coffee, checked the equipment, reviewed the protocols Hayes had left. Anything to avoid looking at the monitors, avoid thinking about those impossible figures pressing buttons in cells that were simultaneously empty and occupied. At 3 a.m., I forced myself to do another round of Blocks A and C. Block B could wait. I wasn't going near that open door. The western corridor felt longer than before, stretching away from me like something alive and hostile. The fluorescent lights flickered, and I heard that sound again. Drip, drip, drip. Water? Blood? Something else. Block was quiet. The inmates were exactly where the monitors showed them. Patrick Torres in cell 3, sleeping or pretending to. Derek Wilson in cell 9, staring at his corner with that same unblinking intensity. When I passed cell 9, Wilson's lips moved, and I heard a whisper so faint I might have imagined it. It's getting closer. I didn't ask what. I didn't want to know. Cell 12 was at the far end. This one held an inmate named Robert Chun, in protective custody after a failed escape attempt had left 3 guards injured. The file said he was dangerous, unstable, prone to violent outbursts. But when I looked through the bars, he was sitting perfectly still on his bunk, hands folded in his lap, eyes closed. "You should leave," he said without opening his eyes. "Before 3:17. I'm just doing my rounds. The showers. You need to be far away from the north wing when they turn on. If you're close enough to hear them, you're too close. If you're close enough to see the steam coming out, it's already too late." What happens at 3:17? Now his eyes opened, and they were filled with a terror that seemed too genuine to be an act. They come to wash away their sins. All the men who died in those showers, all the ones who were killed there, murdered there, left to bleed out on those tiles. They come back every night at the exact moment the last one died. And if you're in that hallway when they manifest, they'll think you're one of the ones who killed them. They'll think you're one of the guards who looked the other way, who held the door shut, who let it happen. That's impossible. Then why's in the rules? Chin's voice dropped to a whisper. Why do we all know about it? Every inmate in this facility knows that at 3:17, you stay away from the north wing. We can hear it from our cells. The water running, the screaming. Sometimes we hear guards screaming too. The ones who didn't believe, who thought they could break the rules. We hear them, but in the morning, there's no bodies. Just empty uniforms in the locker room and another name on the memorial wall. I check my watch. 3:09 a.m. 8 minutes until the shower's activated. The north wing corridor branched off from the main hallway between blocks A and C. I needed to finish this round and get back to the control room. "Stay safe, Officer Bennett," Chun said, and this time his voice held something like genuine concern. "You seem like a decent person. This place doesn't care. It'll take decent people just as fast as it takes the bad ones. Maybe faster." I completed the round quickly, counting heads, checking locks, maintaining the facade of normalcy, even though nothing about this place was normal. At 3:15, I was back in the main corridor, and I could see the entrance to the north wing 50 feet away. The lights in that corridor were already flickering. I could hear the pipes groaning, ancient plumbing coming to life after hours of silence. The temperature had dropped again, and frost was forming on the walls near the north wing entrance. 3:16 a.m. I should have returned to the control room. Should have put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever was about to happen. But something held me there, some morbid curiosity or disbelief that overrode common sense. Haze had said my eyes would play tricks. Maybe Chun was just trying to scare me. Maybe the shower activation was just automated maintenance. 3:17 a.m. The pipe screamed, not groaned, screamed, like metal tearing itself apart. Water hammered through the system with such force that the walls vibrated. And then I heard the showers turn on, a dozen streams of water hitting tile with a sound like heavy rain. I stayed where I was, 50 feet from the north wing entrance, far enough to be safe, close enough to see. Steam began pouring from the corridor, thick and gray, smelling of rust and copper, and something organic that made my stomach turn. The overhead lights in the north wing went out, leaving only the dim emergency lighting. And through the steam, I saw figures. They walked out of the north wing corridor, like men leaving a locker room after a shift. But these weren't men, not anymore. They were translucent, like projections, their bodies flickering between solid and transparent. Prison uniforms from different eras. Some wore the striped outfits from decades ago. Others wore orange jumpsuits. A few were naked, their bodies showing brutal wounds. There were at least 30 of them. They walked with purpose, moving down the main corridor toward Block A. Some were crying. Some were screaming silently, mouths open but no sound emerging. Others had their hands pressed to wounds that still bled ghostly blood. One figure stopped directly in front of me. A young man, couldn't have been more than 20, with a prison tattoo on his neck and a gash across his throat so deep I could see through to the vertebrae. He looked at me with eyes that held all the terror and pain of his death. His mouth moved, and though no sound came out, I could read his lips, "Help me." Then he walked through me. The cold was instant and absolute, like being plunged into Arctic water. I felt his death, experienced it in a flash. The ambush in the showers, the shiv across his throat, the desperate gasping as he drowned in his own blood while guards stood outside the door, making sure no one interrupted. I felt his betrayal, his rage, his absolute helplessness. When his sensation passed, I was on my knees, gasping, frost coating my uniform where he'd passed through me. The ghostly procession continued down the corridor, the spirits heading toward toward the inmates who might have been their killers, or their victims, or their witnesses. At 3:20, the shower shut off. The steam dissipated. The figures faded like mist in sunlight. The lights in the north wing flickered back on, showing an empty, normal corridor with no evidence that anything unusual had occurred. I stumbled back to the control room, my entire body shaking. The monitor showed everything normal. Block A inmates in their cells. Empty corridors. Standard operations. But I knew what I'd seen. I felt it. That young man's death was burned in my neurons like a brand. The radio crackled. "Control, this is Gate 1. You okay? Your radio check is late." I picked up the radio with numb fingers. "Control here. Sorry, I was conducting rounds. Everything's clear. You sure about that? You sound off." "I'm fine. Just tired." A long pause. "You witnessed the 317 event, didn't you?" I didn't answer. "Listen to me, Bennett. What you saw was real. Don't let anyone tell you it wasn't. Don't let yourself believe it was fatigue or stress or imagination. It was real. Those men died badly, and this place remembers. This place holds on to things it shouldn't. The only way to survive here is to accept that and follow the rules. The rules exist because people learn the hard way what happens when you don't." "How many people?" I asked. "How many have died here? Guards, I mean." "Officially? 3 in the last 40 years. Unofficially," he sighed, 17 that I know of. Some disappeared. Some were found dead with no explanation. A few went mad first, like Marsh and Kim. The memorial wall in the admin building has names on it. Pay attention to the dates. You'll notice patterns. Years where multiple guards died within months of each other. Always night shift. Always the West Wing. Why doesn't anyone shut this place down? Because it's not the building, Bennett. It's the land. Blackwood Prison was built on the site of a mass grave. 1,200 bodies from a cholera outbreak in 1847. Before that, it was a battlefield. Before that, tribal burial grounds going back centuries. This land is soaked in death, and building a prison on top of it just added more death to the pile. You could demolish every building, pave over every foundation, and it wouldn't matter. The dead don't need architecture to exist. They just need suffering to anchor them. I wanted to quit right then. Wanted to walk out the door and never look back. But I thought about my student loans, my empty bank account, the rejection letters from every other job I'd applied for. And I thought about something else. A stubborn refusal to let fear control me completely. "I'm finishing my shift," I said. "Good man. Just remember, you've got one more Victorian round at 4 a.m. And Bennett, what happened at 317 was nothing compared to what happens if you break the rules in the old section. The spirits in the North Wing are tragic. They're echoes, not predators. But what's in the Victorian blocks? That's different. That's active. That's hunting. The radio went silent. I checked the time. 3:47 a.m. 13 minutes until I had to walk back into that nightmare. Past the singing child, past the execution cells, past 237, and whatever was inside it. I pulled out the rule sheet and read them again, memorizing every word. These rules were written in blood. Rodriguez, it said. How much blood? How many people had died learning what not to do? Rule 6 stood out. If you see someone in an orange jumpsuit in the decommissioned blocks, do not engage. Walk away calmly. They cannot follow you past the green line, painted on the floor. There was a green line. I'd seen it during my first Victorian round, painted across the floor at the entrance to Block D. An arbitrary-seeming stripe that now carried terrible significance. Something about that line acted as a barrier, a threshold the dead couldn't cross. But what happened if you were on the wrong side of it when you encountered them? At 3:58, I gathered my flashlight and keys. My coffee had gone cold again, but I drank it anyway, needing the caffeine even if it tasted like battery acid. The control room suddenly felt safe, a bubble of normalcy in an ocean of horror. Leaving it felt like stepping out of a shelter into a storm. I opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The main lights were on, everything visible and normal. But I could feel the weight of the facility around me. Thousands of tons of stone and steel and suffering pressing down like a physical force. The Victorian section door waited at the end of the hall, that ancient lock seeming to watch me approach. I inserted the tarnished key and turned it. The lock groaned. Or was that a voice, forming a word too low to understand? The door opened, and cold air rushed out, carrying that smell of age and decay. I stepped through, and the door closed behind me with a boom that echoed through the ancient corridors like a judge's gavel. 4 a.m., the darkest hour, the time when the barrier between worlds grew thin, when the dead walked most freely, when the rules mattered most. I began my round, flashlight beam cutting through darkness that seemed actively resistant to light. The first cells were empty, as before. Rusted frames, broken fixtures, graffiti scratched by desperate hands. Normal abandonment. Then I reached the cell where I'd heard the singing child. I kept my eyes forward, didn't look through the bars, followed Rule 2 exactly. But as I passed, I heard again. That same song, high and clear and innocent. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. Keep walking. Don't look. It's not a child. Why won't you help me? The voice changed, became plaintive, desperate. I'm scared. I'm so scared. Please, mister, please help me. My feet want to stop. Every instinct screamed to me to look, to help, to investigate. But Hayes's words echoed. That's how it gets you. It wants you to look, to care, to investigate. I kept walking, and the voice followed me, staying just behind, always at the edge of my hearing. Don't leave me here. Don't leave me alone with them. They hurt me. They keep hurting me. Please, please, please. The corridor stretched longer than it should. The cells seemed to multiply, door after door after door, all identical, all empty, all wrong. My flashlight began to flicker, the beam weakening despite fresh batteries. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Not my own. These were bare feet on stone, small feet, child-sized feet, running closer, getting faster, accompanied by breathing that sounded more like panting, like an animal. Thank you for stopping, the child's voice said, now directly behind me. Thank you for caring. Thank you for looking. But I hadn't stopped. I hadn't looked. I was still walking, still following the rules, still keeping my eyes forward. Not yet. The voice whispered, disappointed. But you will. They always do eventually. And when you do, I'll be waiting. The footsteps stopped. The presence faded. I risked a glance back and saw nothing but empty corridor and shadows that moved wrong. I was shaking as I entered Block E, the execution wing. The air here felt heavier, saturated with death. How many men had died in these cells, waiting for their appointment with the gallows or the chair? How many had spent their last nights staring at these walls, knowing exactly when and how their lives would end? My flashlight illuminated cell 47, and I froze. There was someone sitting on the bunk, a figure in an orange jumpsuit, head down, shoulders slumped. An inmate where no inmate should be. Rule 6. If you see someone in an orange jumpsuit in the decommissioned blocks, do not engage. Walk away calmly. I started backing up, keeping the figure in sight. Moving toward the green line, I'd crossed entering Block D. The figure didn't move, didn't react. Just sat there, a statue of despair. Then its head lifted, and I saw its face. It had no eyes. Just empty sockets that somehow still looked directly at me. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, wider than any human jaw could stretch, and it screamed, a sound like metal tearing, like bones breaking, like every moment of suffering compressed into a single note. I ran, forgot about walking calmly, forgot about maintaining composure, just ran back toward Block D and that green line painted across the floor. Behind me, I heard footsteps pounding on stone, moving far faster than any human could run, accompanied by that terrible screaming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The green line appeared ahead, and I threw myself across it, stumbling and falling on the other side. I rolled over, flashlight swinging wildly, expecting to see the eyeless figure right on top of me. But it had stopped at the line. It stood on the other side, toes touching the green paint, but not crossing, swaying slightly like a tree in wind. The screaming had stopped. Now it just stared at me with those empty sockets, head tilted at an angle that suggested curiosity or hunger or both. Then it stepped backward, melting into the shadows of Block E. Orange jumpsuit fading until only the white of its teeth remained visible. Teeth arranged in a grin that held nothing human. Then even those vanished, and I was alone in the corridor, gasping, heart hammering, every nerve on fire. I forced myself to my feet. Still had to check cell 237. Still had to complete the round. The rules didn't care that I was terrified. The rules didn't care that I'd just escaped something that should have been impossible. The rules only cared that. I followed them. Block F waited ahead, and, at its end, the red door of cell 237. I approached slowly, flashlight beam steady now through sheer force of will. The other cells were empty, holding only shadows and the memory of suffering. Then I stood before 237. The door was still locked, still secure, all bolts and padlocks in place. I reached out to test the lock, and the moment my fingers touched metal, the voice returned. You ran from the Hollow Man wise. He's consumed 17 people since this prison opened. Inmates and guards both. Takes them whole, leaves nothing behind but their clothes. But me, the voice was smooth, cultured, nothing like the creature described. I only want conversation, company, perhaps, eventually, freedom. But we have time for that. We have all the time in the world. I'm just checking the lock, I said, hating how my voice shook. Of course you are. Protocol. Rules. The chains that keep both of us imprisoned. Tell me, Evan Bennett, do you know why I'm here? What I did to earn this cell, this isolation, this eternity of darkness. I don't care. Laughter, soft and cold. You will. Curiosity is human nature. And I have so many stories to tell. Stories about this prison, about the men who died here, about the guards who thought they were safe behind their locks and rules, about what really happened to Officer Marsh when he found this door open. Would you like to know what he saw? What broke his mind so completely that he hasn't spoken a coherent sentence in 6 years? My hand was still on the lock. The metal had grown cold, frost forming under my palm. I could feel something on the other side of that door, something vast and patient and hungry. The lock is secure, I said, pulling my hand away. I'm leaving. Yes, you are. For now. But you'll be back. Twice every night, 5 nights every week. We'll have plenty of time to get acquainted. And eventually, Evan, you'll want to know. You'll need to know. And when that need becomes strong enough, when curiosity finally overrides fear, you'll look through this window. And then, the voice became a whisper that seemed to come from inside my own skull. Then we'll really begin. I walked away from cell 237, forcing myself not to run, not to show fear. But I could feel it watching me through that locked door, feel its attention like a weight on my shoulders. And I knew, absolutely knew, that it was right. Eventually, I would want to know what was inside that cell. Eventually, curiosity would win. The question was whether I'd be strong enough to resist when that moment came. I completed the Victorian round and returned to the control room at 4:23 a.m. The monitors showed normal operations. Block A inmates sleeping. Block C inmates sitting quietly. The Victorian section empty and still. No evidence of screaming figures or eyeless creatures or things that knew my name. But the frost on my uniform sleeve was real. The cold that had soaked through to my bones was real. The voice from cell 237 was real. I had survived my first round at 4 a.m. Only 2 more hours until day shift arrived. 2 more hours until I could leave this place and pretend, at least for a few precious hours, that none of this was real. The radio crackled. Control, this is Gate 1. You made it back. Good. How was the Victorian round? I follow the rules. That's all that matters. 2 hours left, Bennett. You're going to make it. Most rookies do on their first night. It's the second week when the real trouble starts, when familiarity breeds carelessness. But tonight, you're doing fine. I wasn't fine. I was traumatized, exhausted, questioning my sanity and my life choices. But I was alive, and according to the unofficial count, that put me ahead of 17 guards who hadn't been so fortunate. Thank you, I managed. Get some coffee. Do your hourly rounds. Stay away from B block. That door is still open, and it can stay that way. At 6 a.m., Officer Rodriguez himself will relieve you. He always does on a rookie's first night. Likes to see who makes it and who doesn't. Be proud, Bennett. You're surviving. That's more than some people can say. The radio went silent, leaving me alone with the hum of equipment and the weight of what I'd experienced. I had 2 hours left, 120 minutes, 7,200 seconds, and then I could leave this place. But even as I thought it, I knew the truth. Blackwood Correctional Facility wouldn't let me go so easily. I might leave the building, might go home and sleep and pretend to have a normal life. But part of me would stay here. Part of me would always be walking those corridors, hearing that child's song, seeing those eyeless sockets, feeling that cold voice from cell 237 worm its way into my thoughts. The facility had marked me now, and in this place, marks were permanent. I poured another cup of terrible coffee and settled in for the longest 2 hours of my life. The first week passed in a blur of terror and exhaustion. 5 shifts, each 8 hours long, each one confirming that the horrors of my first night weren't flukes or hallucinations. The singing child in Block D never stopped trying to lure me. The showers ran at 3:17 a.m. with clockwork precision, releasing their procession of the dead. Cell 237 whispered to me every time I checked the lock, and the voice grew more familiar, more persuasive, more knowing with each encounter. On my days off, I try to research the facility. Public records showed the basics. Built in 1847, expanded in 1903, decommissioned in 1983, reopened last year. But the details were sanitized, official. Deaths were listed as industrial accidents or medical emergencies. Disappearances were attributed to voluntary resignation or transfer. The 17 dead guards that Gate 1 had mentioned, they didn't exist in any official documentation. I found old newspaper articles, though. Small stories buried in back pages. Easy miss unless you were looking. Correctional officer takes on life. Prison guard dies in single car accident. Veteran officer commits self to psychiatric care. The dates matched what Gate 1 had told me. Clusters of incidents, always involving night shift workers from the West Wing. One article from 1979 caught my attention. A guard named Thomas Weaver had been found in cell 237, unconscious, with no clear explanation for how he'd gotten inside. The cell had been locked from the outside. No keys were missing. Yet there he was, discovered during a routine morning check, comatose and unresponsive. The article said he died 3 days later without regaining consciousness. The official cause of death was stroke, but the reporter had interviewed Weaver's wife, who claimed her husband had been terrified of the thing in the hole for months before his death. The thing in the hole. That was what cell 237 had been called, apparently. A hole where they put things that needed to be forgotten. But what had been put there? What was inside that cell? My second week began on a Monday night. I arrived at sunset, the October sky now deeper into autumn, the cold more pronounced. The parking lot had fewer vehicles, budget cuts, Rodriguez had mentioned during my first week debrief. Fewer staff meant longer hours for those who remained. It also meant less backup if something went wrong. Rodriguez was waiting for me in his office, looking more tired than I remembered. The job was aging him, I realized. Or perhaps the facility itself was draining him, the way it drained everyone who worked here long enough. Bennett, week 2. How are you holding up? I'm managing, sir. That's what everyone says until they're not. He lit a cigarette, ignoring the no-smoking signs. You've seen enough now to understand what this place is. The question is whether you can continue seeing it 5 nights a week without it breaking you. Some people adapt, build up calluses on their sanity, learn to compartmentalize. Others. He gestured at a framed photo on his wall, showing a dozen guards in uniform. That was the night shift crew from 5 years ago. Of the 12 people in that photo, only 3 still work here. 2 transferred to other facilities. 3 quit within 6 months. 2 died in what were officially ruled accidents. 1 is in psychiatric care. The last one disappeared entirely, walked off his shift one night, and was never seen again. Which category do you fall into, sir? He smiled without humor. The stubborn category. I've been here 32 years, Bennett. I've seen things that would make your worst nightmares seem like children's stories. But I'm still here because someone has to be. Someone has to maintain the rules, enforce the protocols, make sure the really dangerous things stay contained. If we abandon this facility, if we let it sit empty and unsupervised, he shook his head. The walls between our world and theirs would collapse entirely. What you've seen so far, the singing child, the shower spirits, the hollow man in Block E, those are nothing. They're echoes and revenants, dangerous but limited. What's in cell 237 is different. That's not ghost. That's something older, something that was here before the prison, before the mass grave, maybe before humans walked this land at all. And it wants out. Then why not destroy it? Because we don't know if it can be destroyed. We don't know if destroying its current vessel would free it, or simply force it to find a new one. So we contain it. We lock it away. We follow the rules that keep it isolated. And we pray that no one is ever foolish enough to let it out. He handed me my equipment, radio, flashlight, keys. Week 2 is when most people break a rule. The fear fades just enough that you start thinking you understand how things work. You start taking shortcuts, making assumptions. Don't. The rules exist for specific reasons, and every single one was learned the hard way. Follow them exactly, every single night, no matter how routine it seems. Yes, sir. Good. Hayes is waiting for you. She'll be doing spot checks this week, making sure you're following proper procedure. Consider it continuing education. I found Hayes in the control room, reviewing footage from the previous night. She looked up when I entered, her expression unreadable. Bennett, survive your first week. That puts you in the minority. She gestured at the monitors. Tonight we're going to focus on Block B. That door that opened during your first shift, it's still open. 3 more doors have opened since then. We need to do a visual inspection, confirm that nothing's come out. But the rules say don't investigate anomalies in B block without cause. This is cause. Multiple unsecured doors in a decommissioned block is a safety hazard. Something might have gotten through, might be moving into the active areas. We need to check. Every instinct screamed at me that this was wrong. Gate 1 had explicitly said to leave B block alone. But Hayes was my superior, and she seemed confident this was necessary. What are we looking for? I asked. Anything that shouldn't be there. Homeless people sometimes break into abandoned sections of facilities like this, looking for shelter. We've also had problems with urban explorers, idiots with cameras who think sneaking into a closed prison is fun. And then she paused. Other things that don't belong in any category. You'll know them when you see them. We assembled our equipment, flashlights, radios, the master keys for B block. Hayes checked her sidearm, and I noticed her hands were steady. She'd done this before, whatever this was. At 8:30 p.m., we entered B block together. The corridor was as I remembered it. Empty cells, peeling paint, that pervasive sense of wrongness. Cell 7 stood open, its door swung wide, darkness inside. But now Cell 11 was also open, and Cell 4, and Cell 9. Standard search procedure. Hayes instructed. I'll take the left side, you take the right. Check each cell. Call out if you find anything. Do not, under any circumstances, enter a cell alone. If you see something, you back away and radio me immediately. We started down the corridor. The first 3 cells on my side were empty. Rusted bed frames, graffiti, nothing unusual. But in Cell 4, the one with its door standing open, I saw something that made me stop. There were scratches on the wall. Fresh scratches, cutting through decades of grime and paint, exposing bare concrete underneath. They formed words, written in a hand desperate enough to use fingernails as a writing implement. Don't let it wear your face. I radioed Hayes. Cell 4, right side. You need to see this. She crossed over, shining her light on the wall. Her expression hardened. That wasn't here yesterday. Someone, or something, wrote this recently. What does it mean? I don't know, but I don't like it. She photographed the message with her radio's camera function. Keep searching. The next cell was empty. But Cell 9, the second open door, held something worse. There was a uniform in the cell. A correctional officer's uniform, neatly folded on the bunk, as if someone had removed it piece by piece and arranged it carefully. But there was no officer, no body, just the empty uniform, still holding the shape of the person who'd worn it. Ace, I called, my voice tight. Cell 9. She came quickly, and I heard her breath catch. Christ, that was Officer Marcus Webb's uniform. He disappeared 3 months ago during a night shift. Just vanished. We searched the entire facility, found nothing. The official report said he'd abandoned his post, probably quit without notice. But this, she reached out to touch the uniform, then thought better of it. This means he was here, in the cell. But where's his body? Something moved in my peripheral vision. Just a flicker, a shadow shifting in Cell 11. I spun toward it, flashlight raised, but the cell appeared empty. Did you see that? I whispered. See what? Movement. In Cell 11. Hayes drew her sidearm. Stay behind me. We approached Cell 11 together, moving slowly, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The cell appeared empty. Standard layout, bed frame, toilet, sink. But the air here felt different. Colder. Thicker. Like trying to breathe underwater. Then I saw it. In a corner, where the shadows were deepest, something was standing. Not sitting. Not lying. Standing, pressed into the corner, limbs bent at wrong angles, body too tall and too thin, wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked wet, as if it had just come from the showers. It turned its head toward us, and I saw its face. It was wearing Officer Marcus Webb's face, literally wearing it like a mask, the skin stretched too tight, the features not quite aligned correctly. And beneath that stolen face, I could see something else, something with too many teeth, too many eyes, something that had learned to mimic human form but couldn't quite get the details right. "Back away," Hayes ordered, her voice steady despite the horror. "Slowly. Don't run." The thing in the corner smiled with Webb's face, and the skin tore slightly at the corners of the mouth, revealing darkness underneath. It took a step forward, movements jerky and wrong, joints bending backward. We backed toward the cell door, never taking our eyes off the creature. It followed, but slowly, as if savoring the moment. When it spoke, the voice was Webb's voice, but the words came too fast, overlapping, as if multiple versions of him were speaking simultaneously. "Don't let it wear your face. Don't let it wear your face. Don't let it wear your face." We crossed the threshold of the cell, and Hayes slammed the door shut. The lock engaged automatically, and we heard the thing on the other side throw itself against the bars with inhuman strength. Webb's face pressed between the bars, features distorted, skin stretching impossibly as more of it tried to push through the gap. Then it stopped, retreated back into the shadows of the cell, and I heard it laugh, not with one voice, but with dozens all slightly out of sync. Hayes was on the radio immediately. "Control to Rodriguez. B-block emergency. We have a mimic in cell 11. Repeat, confirmed mimic in cell 11. Requesting containment team. Copy that." Rodriguez's voice came through, tense but unsurprised. "Exit B-block immediately. Do not engage further. Containment team is en route." We ran. Forgot about procedure. Forgot about the other open cells. Just ran back toward the B-block entrance. Behind us, I could hear cell doors opening. Not just cell 11, but others, multiple doors swinging wide simultaneously. And footsteps. Multiple sets of footsteps following us, accompanied by voices that all sounded wrong, all speaking the same warning. "Don't let it wear your face. Don't let it wear your face. Don't let it wear your face." We hit the B-block exit and slammed the door behind us. Hayes locked it with shaking hands, then leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. "A mimic. They're rare, but this facility has at least 3 of them. They inhabit abandoned spaces and take the forms of people who died or disappeared here. Webb must have entered B-block for some reason, broke some rule we don't even know about, and it got him. Took his face, his uniform, his identity. If we hadn't seen through it, if we tried to help Officer Webb," she trailed off, "what would have happened? It would have taken us too, consumed us, added our faces to its collection, worn us like costumes whenever it needed to lure someone else. That's why the rule about not investigating B-block exists. That's why we leave that section alone. Because there are things in there that we can't fight, can't contain, and definitely can't kill. The best we can do is lock them away and hope they stay locked." The containment team arrived 20 minutes later. 4 guards I'd never seen before, wearing tactical gear and carrying equipment that looked more appropriate for a SWAT raid than prison security. They didn't speak to us, just entered B-block with practiced efficiency. I heard sounds through the door, shouting, something metallic clanging, a scream that cut off abruptly. When they emerged 30 minutes later, their leader, a grizzled man with scars on his face that looked like claw marks, reported to Hayes in clipped tones. "Cell 11 secured. Entity contained. We found 2 more in cells 15 and 18. All doors welded shut. B-block is now off limits pending full lockdown procedures." "What about Officer Webb?" Hayes asked. The man's expression turned grim. "What was left of him is being handled. Family will be told it was an accident. Closed casket." They left without another word, carrying sealed containers that I deliberately didn't look at too closely. Some things you didn't want to see, didn't want to know about, didn't want to remember. Rodriguez appeared shortly after, his face pale. "You two okay?" "We're alive," Hayes said. "That's what passes for okay in this place." The mimic in cell 11 was wearing Webb's face. I said, my voice hollow. "How long was it there? How long was it pretending to be him?" Rodriguez lit another cigarette. "Webb disappeared 3 months ago, which means that thing has been in there, wearing him for 3 months. Waiting. The question is, was it waiting for us? Did it know we'd eventually come looking? Or was it waiting for someone else?" The implication hung in the air like smoke. If the mimic had been waiting for someone specific, if it had been planning something beyond simple survival, then what else in this facility was planning? Who else was watching, learning, preparing? "Finish your shift," Rodriguez said. "Standard rounds. Block A, Block C, and the Victorian section. B block is sealed now. You won't be going near it." "And Bennett." He looked at me directly. "You showed good instincts in there. You saw through the mimic's disguise. That's rare. Most people don't realize what they're looking at until it's too late. Whatever you did, whatever tipped you off, remember it. That awareness might save your life." The rest of the night passed in a haze of hypervigilance. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every sound potentially dangerous. When I distributed medications at midnight, I found myself studying each inmate's face, wondering if I'd recognize a mimic if one was pretending to be a prisoner. At 2 a.m., the call buttons activated as usual. I watched the monitors show empty cells, and this time I wondered, were they actually empty? Or were there things in those cells that simply didn't show up on camera? Things that existed in spaces between what we could perceive and what was actually there. The 317 shower vent came and went. The ghostly procession marched past the control room, and I watched one of the spirits, a young man with his throat cut, pause outside the door, looking directly at me through the window. For a moment, our eyes met, and I felt a connection, a flash of understanding. He wasn't just an echo. He was trapped, reliving his death every night, unable to move on, unable to rest. And he knew it. The awareness in his eyes was heartbreaking. Then he faded with the others, pulled back into whatever cycle kept him bound to this place. At 4 a.m., I steeled myself for the Victorian round. The ancient door opened with its usual groan, and I stepped into the cold darkness beyond. The singing child started immediately, more insistent tonight. "Come play with me. Come see what I really am. Don't you want to know? Don't you want to see?" I kept walking, eyes forward, following Rule 2 exactly. But the voice was harder to ignore tonight. Perhaps because I was exhausted. Perhaps because I'd already seen too much horror, and my mental defenses were weakening. "Officer Bennett," the child's voice called. "Evan, I know your mother's name. Would you like to hear it? I know where she lives. I know what she dreams about. I could visit her if you don't visit me." My feet stopped moving. That was a threat, a direct threat against my family. But it was also bait, designed to make me turn around, make me look, make me break the rule. "You can't leave this place," I said to the empty air. "You're trapped here, just like everything else." Laughter, high and cruel. "Am I? Are you sure? How do you think I know about your mother? About her little house on Maple Street? About the garden she tends every morning? I can see beyond these walls. Evan, I can reach beyond them. And if you won't come to me, perhaps I'll come to you. Perhaps I'll visit you at home, when you're sleeping, when you're vulnerable. Would you like that?" I forced myself to keep walking. It was lying. It had to be lying. The rules kept these things contained. They couldn't leave. They couldn't. 237 knows about her too. The voice whispered. "We talk, you know, all of us. We share information. We plan. We wait. And when the time is right, when enough rules have been broken, when the walls are weak enough, we'll all get out. And we'll remember everyone who walked past us, everyone who ignored us, everyone who kept us locked away." I reached Block E and saw the hollow man standing at the green line. right where I'd left him during my last encounter. He wasn't moving, just standing there, eyeless face pointed in my direction. But as I passed, he raised one hand and pointed at me. Just pointed, like a promise or a curse. Cell 237 was ahead, that red door like a wound in the darkness. I approached it with dread coiling in my stomach. The lock was secure. I could see that from 10 feet away. But I had to check it, had to follow the protocol, had to put my hand on that cold metal and feel the thing inside press against my consciousness. My fingers touched the lock, and the voice came immediately, stronger than ever. "Good evening, Evan. I've been thinking about you, about our conversations, about your future. Do you know what I am?" "No," I said, though I shouldn't have engaged at all. "I'm a collector. I collect faces, voices, memories, souls. Everything that makes a person who they are, I take it, preserve it, add it to my collection. The mimic and B block. That's crude work, amateur hour. I'm much more refined. When I take someone, I don't just wear their face. I become them, completely and utterly. I know their memories, feel their emotions, understand their deepest secrets. I am them, and they are me forever. The lock is secure. Yes, it is. For now. But locks can be opened, Evan. Accidents happen. Keys get turned. Doors swing wide. And when it happens, when I'm finally free, I'll have so many choices. So many people to become. Your mother would be interesting. Or perhaps your sister. Oh yes, I know about her too. Claire, isn't it? Works at the hospital, second shift. Walks to her car alone through that dark parking garage. So vulnerable. So trusting. She'd make a lovely addition to my collection. My hand clenched on a lock. Knuckles white. You're never getting out. Never's a long time, Evan. And this facility has been here for 178 years. In that time, how many nevers have been proven wrong? How many impossible things have become possible? I'm patient. I'm eternal. And eventually, someone will make a mistake. Someone always does. I pulled my hand away and stepped back. The voice followed, echoing in the corridor. Sleep well, Evan. Dream of me. Dream of your mother in her garden. Dream of Claire walking to her car. Dream of all the people you care about. And imagine me wearing their faces. Because one day, you won't have to imagine. I walked away from cell 237 faster than I should have, nearly running by the time I reached Block D. The singing child called after me, and the hollow man turned to watch me pass, but I barely registered them. All I could think about was that voice, those threats, those terrible promises. Back in the control room, I was shaking, not from cold this time, but from rage and fear and helplessness. That thing knew about my family. It had somehow reached beyond these walls, gathered information, weaponized it against me. How? How is that possible if it was truly contained? I picked up the radio. Control to Gate 1. Go ahead, Bennett. The thing in cell 237. Can it really reach outside the facility? Can it actually touch people beyond these walls? A long silence. Then, Rodriguez needs to answer that. Hold on. A minute later, Rodriguez's voice came through. Bennett, what did it say to you? I told him. Everything. The threats against my mother and sister, the claims about reaching beyond the facility, the promises of what would happen when it got free. Another silence. Then Rodriguez spoke, his voice heavy. It's lying. Mostly. It can see things, yes. It has some kind of connection to the outside world. We don't understand how. It knows things it shouldn't know, sees things it shouldn't see. But it can't act on that information. It can't leave. It can't touch anyone beyond these walls. Not while it's contained. Not while it's contained. I repeated. What happens if it's not contained? Then God help us all. Because if cell 237 ever opens, if that thing ever gets free, it won't just threaten your family. It'll threaten everyone. Every person you've ever met. Every stranger you've passed on the street. Everyone becomes potential prey. That's why we maintain these protocols. That's why the rules are absolute. That door stays locked, no matter what it says, no matter what it promises, no matter what it threatens. Yes, sir. And Bennett, it's trying to get in your head. That's what it does. It finds your weak points, your vulnerabilities, your fears, and it exploits them. The threats against your family are real in the sense that it genuinely wants to harm them, but they're empty as long as that door stays locked. Don't let it win. Don't let it break you mentally, even though it can't break you physically. I signed off and tried to focus on the remaining hours of my shift, but the thing's words echoed in my mind, and I found myself thinking about my mother's house on Maple Street, about Claire's parking garage, about all the normal places that suddenly felt vulnerable and exposed. At 5 a.m., I did another round of blocks A and C. The inmates were restless tonight. More movement than usual, more whispers, more eyes watching me as I passed. Derek Wilson, the one who stared at corners, actually looked at me directly for the first time. "It's building something," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "Piece by piece, night by night, it's building something big. Can't you feel it? The air's different. The walls are listening. Everything's waiting. Waiting for what? For the moment. The right moment. When all the pieces are in place. When all the rules have been tested. When all the weaknesses have been found. That's when it'll happen. That's when everything falls apart." I wanted to dismiss it as the ramblings of a disturbed mind, but Wilson's eyes were clear, focused, sane in a way that was somehow more disturbing than madness would have been. He knew something, saw something, and whatever was terrified him. At 6 a.m., Rodriguez arrived to relieve me. He looked even more tired than usual, as if the night had aged him years instead of hours. "Second week, second shift," he said. "You're still here, still sane, still following the rules. That's good, but I can see it in your eyes. You're starting to understand, starting to see the pattern. The thing in 237 isn't the only problem. It's just the most vocal one. Everything in this facility is connected somehow, all working toward something. We don't know what. We don't know when. We just know that every night, the pressure builds a little more. Then why stay? Why keep this place running? Because if we abandon it, if we let it sit empty and unsupervised, the pressure will build until something breaks. And when it does, when whatever's being held here gets free, it won't stay contained to this facility. It'll spread, like a disease, like a cancer, infecting the town, the county, the state. That's what happened in 1983 when they first tried to decommission this place. 2 weeks after the last guard left, people in the nearby town started dying. 27 deaths in 3 months, suicides, murders, accidents that weren't really accidents. The government brought in specialists, reopened the facility with a skeleton crew, and the death stopped. We're not guards, Bennett. We're containment specialists. We're the cork in a bottle full of poison. Remove us, and everything spills out. He handed me a folder. This is information on Officer Webb, his family, his background, his life before he disappeared. I want you to read it, memorize it, understand who he was. Because that's who the mimic is pretending to be. That's whose face it stole. And the next time you see it, and you will see it again, because mimics escape containment regularly, you'll need to know the difference between the real person's memories and the creature's imitation. That difference might save your life. I took the folder, though I didn't want to. Didn't want to know about Webb's wife, his kids, his dreams that would never be fulfilled. Didn't want to carry that weight along with everything else. "Go home," Rodriguez said. "Get some sleep. Come back tonight ready to do it all again. And Bennett, don't go to your mother's house today. Don't call your sister. The thing in 237 is watching for connections, looking for ways to affect you emotionally. The less you engage with the people it threatened, the less power those threats have. I know it's hard, but trust me on this. I left Blackwood as the sun rose, painting the ugly gray walls in shades of gold and pink that made the facility look almost beautiful. Almost. But I knew what was inside those walls. knew what walked those corridors when darkness fell. No amount of sunlight could make that pretty. I drove home in a daze, the folder about Officer Webb sitting on my passenger seat like an accusation. At a red light, I opened it, scanning the first page. Marcus Webb, age 34, married for 12 years, 2 daughters aged 8 and 10. Worked at Blackwood for 6 years, exemplary record, never missed a shift. Until the night he entered B block and never came out. There was a photo. Webb smiling, arm around his wife, daughters grinning at the camera. A normal family, a normal life. All of it erased by something wearing an orange jumpsuit and learning to mimic human form. The light turned green, and I drove on. But I couldn't stop thinking about Webb's daughters, now growing up without a father. About his wife, who probably still hoped he'd come home someday, not knowing that something was wearing his face in a locked cell, using his identity to lure others to their doom. I got home to my small apartment and tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing in cell 11, saw Webb's face stretched wrong, saw the darkness underneath. I heard the singing child promising to visit my family. I felt the cold voice from 237 breathing promises of possession and collection into my mind. At 2 p.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee. My phone showed missed calls from my mother and a text from my sister Claire. Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay? Rodriguez had said not to contact them. But how could I not? How could I ignore my family just because some supernatural entity was using them as psychological leverage? I started to type a response, then stopped. If 237 was watching, if it really could see beyond the facility somehow, then any contact with my family would confirm that its threats were effective, would give it more ammunition, more ways to hurt me. I deleted the unsent message and put my phone away. 3 more shifts this week. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then 2 days off, then another 5-shift week. How long could I do this? How long before the cumulative horror, the constant stress, the psychological warfare broke me the way it had broken Marsh and Kim and Webb? But I knew the answer. I keep doing it as long as I could, because the alternative was worse. Because if I quit, if I walked away, someone else would take my place. Someone who didn't know the rules yet, who didn't understand the dangers, who might make a fatal mistake. And besides, despite the terror, despite the threats, despite everything, I needed to know, needed to understand what was really happening in that facility. What 237 really was. What the mimics were waiting for. What Wilson meant when he said something was being built. Curiosity had killed plenty of cats and correctional officers, but it was also the only thing keeping me invested in survival. If I didn't care about answers, I'd have nothing to hold on to when the darkness closed in. I spent the afternoon reading the rest of Webb's file and researching other incidents at Blackwood. By the time sunset approached and I had to return to work, I'd filled a notebook with questions that probably had no good answers. But I'd be asking them anyway, because in a place like Blackwood Correctional Facility, the only thing more dangerous than knowing too much was knowing too little. And somewhere in the darkness of cell 237, something ancient and patient was smiling at that thought, pleased that its chosen prey was thinking exactly what it wanted him to think. The trap was being baited. The pieces were moving into position, and I was walking right into it, eyes open, knowing it was a trap, but unable to stop myself. Because that's what it did. That's what it had always done. And 178 years of practice had made it very, very good at its job. Wednesday night began like any other, with the same sunset ritual, the same equipment check, the same weight of dread settling over me as I entered Blackwood. But something felt different. The air had a charge to it, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The facility seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. Rodriguez was waiting for me in the admin building, and he looked worse than I'd ever seen him. His hand shook as he lit a cigarette, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept in days. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. A serious problem. Last night, during Hayes' shift, she reported that cell 237's lock was warm. Not just warm, hot. Hot enough that she burned her fingers checking it. That's never happened before. What does it mean? It means it's getting stronger. The containment is weakening. We brought in specialists, but they're not sure why. The lock should be secure. The protocols haven't changed. But something's different. Something's wrong. He handed me a modified rule sheet. The original rules were there, but now there were additions in red ink. Rule 9. New if cell 237's lock feels warm to the touch. Report immediately, but complete the lock check. Do not linger. Do not engage in conversation with the entity. Check and move on. Rule 10. New if you see more than 3 figures in orange jumpsuits during a single round of the Victorian section. Evacuate immediately and radio for assistance. Do not attempt to count them. Do not attempt to identify them. Just leave. Rule 11. New if any inmate in Block A or C calls you by your full name without you having introduced yourself. In the interaction immediately and report to control. They are not speaking of their own volition. Why the new rules? I asked, though part of me already knew. Because the old ones aren't enough anymore. The facility is changing. The entities are adapting. What worked last month might not work tonight. We're in reactive mode now, updating protocols based on incidents as they happen. It's not ideal, but it's all we have. I looked at the new rules, feeling the weight of them. More restrictions. More invisible lines that couldn't be crossed. More ways to die or go mad if you made a mistake. There's something else, Rodriguez said, and now his voice dropped to barely a whisper. We found something in the archives. Documents from 1847, from when the prison was first built. They mentioned cell 237, except it wasn't originally a cell. It was a well, a deep well that the construction crew found when they were laying the foundation. They tried to fill it in, but the material kept disappearing. Nothing they put down there stayed. So finally, they just built around it, sealed it with iron and stone, and pretended it was a cell. But it's not. It's a hole, a pit. And according to these documents, there was something already living at the bottom of it. Something that had been there long before humans arrived. Something that the local tribes had sealed away centuries earlier. What was it? The documents call it the collector of faces. They say it's older than humanity, that it existed before our species learned language. Its nature is consumption, not of flesh, but of identity. It wants to be everything, everyone all at once. And according to the tribal legends, it nearly succeeded once. Nearly broke free and consumed an entire settlement. The only reason it didn't spread further was because a shaman managed to seal it again, but the effort killed him and 12 others. Rodriguez stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another. That's what we're dealing with, Bennett. Not a ghost, not a demon. Something older and stranger than our myths can properly describe. And it's getting stronger because we keep giving it fuel. What do you mean? Every person who works here, every inmate who's housed here, every visitor who steps through these doors, we're all feeding it. Our fear, our attention, our consciousness. It feeds on awareness, on being known and acknowledged. And in 178 years, thousands of people have known about it, thought about it, feared it. That's a lot of fuel. Enough that it's starting to push against its containment. So what do? We follow the rules. We maintain the protocols. We hope it's enough. And if it's not, he met my eyes, and I saw genuine fear there. Then we activate Protocol Omega. What's Protocol Omega? Something you pray you never have to learn about. Now get to work. Standard rounds, standard procedures, but extra vigilance tonight. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you radio immediately. Don't wait. Don't investigate. Don't try to be a hero. Hayes was in the control room when I arrived, but she was being checked by a medic. Her right hand was heavily bandaged, and I could smell burnt flesh. 3rd-degree burns, the medic was saying, You're lucky you didn't lose fingers. What the hell did you touch? Just a lock, Hayes said, her voice tight with pain. Just doing my job. The medic left, shaking his head, and Hayes looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. That thing is heating up in it. Literally. The lock was almost glowing when I touched it. It's like there's a furnace on the other side of that door, like hell itself is pressing against the metal. Whatever's happening, it's accelerating. She left shortly after, heading to the hospital for proper treatment, leaving me alone in the control room. The monitors showed normal operations. Block A inmates in their cells, Block C quiet, the Victorian section dark and still. But I knew better than to trust appearances in this place. At 10 p.m., I began my rounds. Block A was unusually active. Inmates who normally sat quietly were pacing their cells, agitated. The air felt electric, charged with something I couldn't name. And as I passed L3, Patrick Torres pressed his face against the bars. Evan Bennett, he said, using my full name without introduction. It's coming. Can't you feel it? The walls are getting thin. The barriers are breaking. It's going to happen tonight. Rule 11. Any inmate using my full name was not speaking of their own volition. I should have ended the interaction immediately, reported to control. But curiosity overrode caution. What's going to happen tonight? Torres's eyes had that same glassy, distant look I'd seen before. The collector has been planning for weeks, building alliances, promising things. The Hollow Man wants freedom. The singer wants revenge. The Shower Dead want release. All of them, all the entities, all the trap things, 237 has promised them all something. And tonight, when the barriers are weakest, when the fear is highest, when attention is most focused, that's when it makes its move. How? The lock is secure. The protocols are. Locks can be opened from the inside if you know how. And it knows how. It's had 178 years to learn. Torres's voice changed, became multiple voices speaking in unison, none of them his own. It knows about the maintenance tunnels, the ones that run under the facility, the ones that connect to cell 237's well, the ones that aren't on any official map. It's been sending dreams to the maintenance workers, showing them where to dig, where to explore. And tonight, one of them is going to open a passage they shouldn't. One of them is going to break the seal for below. I backed away from the cell, radio in hand. Control to Rodriguez. Emergency. Cell 3. Block Inmate claims entity is planning a breach through maintenance tunnels. Advise. Static. Then Rodriguez's voice. Tense. Copy that. Maintenance crew is working tonight in the sub-basement. I'm sending security down there now. Bennett, complete your rounds, but stay away from any floor drains or access panels. If you see one open, do not investigate. Just run. I continued through block, hyper aware of every sound, every shadow. In cell 9, Derek Wilson was standing for the first time since I'd started working here. He stood at his cell door, hands gripping the bars, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. It's standing right behind you, he whispered. Right now. So close you could reach back and touch it. Don't turn around. Don't look. Just keep walking. It wants you to look. It wants you to see. Don't give it what it wants. Every hair on my body stood up. The temperature behind me had dropped sharply. I could feel a presence there, huge and cold and patient. Something tall enough that its breathing, if it breathed, was coming from somewhere above my head. I walked forward, keeping my eyes on Wilson, refusing to turn around. The presence followed for 3 steps, then stopped. When I risked a glance back, the corridor was empty, but there were wet footprints on the floor behind me, leading back toward the Victorian section entrance. Large footprints, too large to be human, leaving puddles that steamed slightly in the cold air. Block C was in chaos. All 8 inmates were at their cell doors, gripping the bars, shouting. Not words, just noise, primal sounds of fear and rage. Their eyes had rolled back, showing only whites. They moved in perfect synchronization, like puppets controlled by a single hand. Then, simultaneously, they all stopped, turned their heads to look at me, and spoke in that same unified voice I'd heard from Torres. The collector sends its regards. It knows you're special, Evan. It knows you can see things others can't. It wants to offer you a choice. Join us willingly. Let it wear your face with your permission, and it'll spare your family. Resist, and it'll take them first. Let you watch through its eyes as it becomes them. Let you feel their fear as it consumes everything they are. I'm not making any deals with it. All 8 inmates smiled identical smiles. Then your mother dies first. Tonight, when you leave here at 6 a.m., you'll go to check on her, and you'll find it already there, already wearing her face, already living her life. And you'll never know if the woman you're talking to is really her, or if it's the collector, perfectly mimicking everything she is. That doubt will haunt you forever. That uncertainty will poison every interaction. Is this really my mother, or is it a monster? You'll never be sure, never be certain. That's the gift it offers, doubt without end. I fought the urge to run, to grab my keys and drive straight to my mother's house. That's what wanted me distracted, emotional, acting on fear instead of logic. But Rodriguez's words echoed. The threats are real in the sense that it wants to harm them, but they're empty as long as that door stays locked. The door is still locked, I said. You can't get out. You're bluffing. The inmate's smiles widened. Are we? What time is it, Evan? Check your watch. I looked. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until my 4 a.m. Victorian round. Except I was wrong. It wasn't 11:47. It couldn't be. I just finished Block A and C. It should be around. The numbers on my watch changed as I looked at them. 11:48, 11:49, 12 o'clock. Time was moving wrong, skipping forward, compressing. Where had I lost time somehow? Had I been standing in this corridor longer than I thought? You've been talking to us for 3 hours, the unified voice said. Time moves differently when we're involved, when we're in control. You came to Block C at 11:30. It's now 12:47 a.m. Almost time for medications. Almost time for 2 a.m. Almost time for 3:17. Almost time for 4 a.m. in your Victorian round. Time is accelerating, Evan. The whole night is accelerating. Because tonight is special. Tonight, everything changes. I ran back to the control room, bursting through the door. The clock on the wall read 12:51 a.m. Over an hour had passed that I couldn't account for. The monitors showed wrong. Everything was wrong. The cameras showed empty cells in Block C. But I'd just been there. I'd just seen inmates. I just heard them speak. Unless I was losing time, losing reality, losing my grip on what was real and what was manipulation. I grabbed the radio. Control to Rodriguez. Something's wrong. Time's not flowing right. Inmates speaking in unison. Memories don't match reality. I need assistance. No response. Just static. Control to Gate 1. Anyone, please respond. More static. Then, underneath it, a voice. Faint. Familiar. Coming not from the radio, but from somewhere in the facility itself. Come to cell 237. Evan, come see what we've done. Come see what's been freed. The maintenance tunnels are open. The well has been breached. The collector is climbing up from the darkness. And it's so hungry. So very, very hungry. On the monitors, I saw movement in the Victorian section. Figures in orange jumpsuits. Dozens of them. More than should be possible. They walked through the corridors, past the green line, approaching the door that separated the old section from the new. And at the front of the procession, wearing Officer Webb's face, was the mimic from Cell 11. Behind them came something larger, something that made the cameras distort and static when it came into frame. Something tall enough that it had to duck through doorways, with limbs that bent wrong and a face that was everyone's face and no one's face simultaneously. The collector was free. I hit the panic button. Nothing happened. hit again. The alarm system should have activated, should have flooded the facility with guards and containment teams and Protocol Omega, whatever that was. But nothing happened, because the systems were compromised, because time was wrong, because maybe none of this was really happening, or maybe all of it was happening, or maybe I'd gone insane hours ago, and everything since had been a delusion. The radio crackled. Bennett. Rodriguez's voice, but strained, wrong. Bennett, listen to me. What you're seeing isn't real. You've been exposed to a mimetic hazard. The collector is influencing your perceptions. It's not free. It's still contained. But it's in your head now, making you see things, making you believe things. You need to follow Protocol 7. What's Protocol 7? Lock yourself in the control room. Don't look at the monitors. Don't trust your senses. Don't believe anything you see or hear. Just wait. The contamination team is coming. They'll extract you and administer the counteragent. But you have to hold on. You have to resist its influence. Can you do that? Could I? The monitors showed horrors approaching. The walls were breathing. The ceiling was dripping something that looked like blood but smelled like flowers. My hands had too many fingers. The control room was growing smaller, or I was growing larger, where space itself was collapsing. I can try, I said, though my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Good. Don't leave that room. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, no matter who comes to that door and asks to be let in, everyone is suspect. Everything is potentially a lie. Just hold on. We're coming. The radio went dead. I locked the control room door and stepped back from the monitors. Closed my eyes. Tried to center myself in reality, whatever reality was. But even with my eyes closed, I could hear them coming. Footsteps in the corridor. Dozens of footsteps. Hundreds. All moving in unison, approaching the control room. Then a knock on the door. Evan. My mother's voice. Evan, honey, are you in there? I'm worried about you. You haven't called. Please let me in. Not real. Can't be real. Mom doesn't know I work here. Mom wouldn't be here. Evan, it's Claire. Something's wrong with Mom. She's acting strange. I came to find you. Please, I need your help. Not real. Neither of them are here. This is manipulation. Mind games. Officer Bennett. Rodriguez's voice. I need you to open this door. We have to evacuate. The facility is compromised. We're all leaving. You need to come with us now. Could be real. Might be real. But might also be a trick. I kept the door locked. Kept my eyes closed. Kept breathing despite the way the air seemed to thicken. The knocking stopped. Silence fell. Deeper than silence. The complete absence of sound. Like the world had been wrapped in cotton. Then a voice, coming not from the door but from inside the room. From behind me. From right beside my ear, as if someone was leaning over my shoulder, whispering directly into my brain. You're stronger than I expected. Most people break by now. Most people open the door. But you're holding on to reality with both hands. Aren't you? Admirable. Futile, but admirable. I didn't turn around. Didn't open my eyes. Just stood there, breathing, counting seconds, trying to anchor myself to something concrete. Here's the truth, Evan. Everything you've been told is both true and false. I am contained. I am free. Time is moving normally. Time has stopped. Your family is safe. Your family is in danger. All of these things exist simultaneously until you observe them, until you make them real by believing one over the other. That's the nature of perception. That's the power I wield. You're not real, I said. You're a hallucination caused by mimetic exposure. Laughter, soft and cold. Am I? Then why does this feel so real? Why can you feel my breath on your neck? Why can you smell the age on me? Centuries of existence concentrated into this moment. Your rational mind says I'm not here, but every other party knows I am. So which do you believe? Logic or instinct? I felt it then, breath on my neck, cold and smelling of earth and time, and something else, something that predated humanity. My skin crawled. Every instinct screamed to run, to move, to put distance between myself and whatever was behind me. But I held still, because movement was acknowledgement. Movement was giving it power. "I'll make you a deal," the voice continued. "Open your eyes. Look at me. See what I really am. And if you can maintain your sanity after seeing me, if you can look upon my true form and not break, I'll leave your family alone. I'll stay contained. I'll wait another century for freedom. But you have to look. You have to see. You have to know. No deal. Why not? Don't you want to save your mother? Your sister? All I'm asking is that you look. One glance. One moment of truth. And everything else goes away. The threats. The fear. The uncertainty. Just look and know." My hand was shaking. Sweat ran down my back despite the cold. The temptation was enormous. To just look, to end this psychological torture, to know what I was really facing. But I remembered Officer Marsh, catatonic in a psychiatric ward. I remember Patricia Kim, staring silently at walls for 2 years. I remembered Thomas Weaver, who'd been found unconscious in cell 237 and died 3 days later without waking. They'd all looked. They'd all seen. And it had destroyed them. I said no. Silence. Then something brushed against my shoulder. A touch so light it might have been imagination, but so cold it felt like frostbite. The presence behind me shifted, and I heard something that sounded like disappointment. "Another time, then. We have all the time in the world. But I'll leave you with a gift, Evan. A truth you can carry with you. Right now, in this moment, I am both contained and free. The maintenance tunnels are both sealed and open. Your family is both safe and in danger. And until you observe one state or the other, until you choose what to believe, all possibilities exist simultaneously. That's the nature of reality when something like me is involved. We don't follow your rules. We exist in spaces between your certainties. Remember that." The cold presence faded. The thickness in the air dissipated. And when I finally opened my eyes, the control room looked normal. The monitors showed standard views. Inmates sleeping in block, empty corridors, the Victorian section dark and undisturbed. My watch read 1:47 a.m. Had an hour passed? Or had time reset? I had no way to know. The radio crackled. "Bennett, this is Rodriguez. Actual Rodriguez. Not hallucination. If you can hear me, radio back with your employee number and the name of the street you grew up on. Employee 2847. Birch Lane. Good. You're still with us. The mimetic contamination team is in the facility now. They've confirmed that cell 237's lock is still secure, still locked. Whatever you experienced, whatever you saw, it wasn't real. It was psychological warfare. The entity trying to break you mentally since it can't break you physically. What about the maintenance tunnels? Sealed. Always have been. There is no passage under cell 237. We checked the building plans dating back to 1847. The well that the historical documents mentioned, it was filled in with concrete in 1903 during the expansion. Nothing's been down there in over a century. But you saw what I wanted you to see. Bennett, that's what makes this thing so dangerous. It doesn't need to be physically free to cause damage. It can reach into minds, plant ideas, create false memories, make people experience things that never happened. That's why the rules exist, to minimize contact, minimize exposure, minimize the chances of it getting into your head. I sagged against the desk, exhaustion hitting me like a physical blow. How do I know this is real? How do I know you're real? You don't. Not for certain. But that's the point. It wants you doubting everything, questioning everything. Don't give it that power. Trust the protocols. Trust the rules. They're designed to keep you anchored to consensus reality, even when your perceptions are compromised. The door to the control room opened, and 3 people in hazmat suits entered. They moved efficiently, checking me with handheld devices that beeped and flashed. One of them administered an injection, something cold that spread through my veins and made the world sharpen into painful clarity. Mimetic exposure, level 3. One of them reported into a radio. Administering counteragent. Subject is coherent and responsive. No apparent psychotic break. They worked around me, checking the equipment, reviewing the monitor logs, comparing timestamps. After 20 minutes, they seemed satisfied. "You're clean," the lead technician said, her voice muffled by the hazmat suit. The exposure was contained to your perceptions. Nothing in the facility actually changed. Cell 237 is still secure. No breach occurred. You experience what we call a perceptual cascade. The entity layers multiple false realities over each other until you can't tell what's real. The counteragent will help stabilize your baseline reality, but you'll probably have flashbacks for a few days. That's normal. Just remember, if something seems impossible, it probably is. They left, taking their equipment with them, and I was alone in the control room again. Rodriguez came in shortly after, looking relieved. "You held on," he said. "When it told you to look, you didn't. When it offered you deals, you refused. That's more than most people manage during their first major exposure. I'm putting a commendation in your file. I don't want a commendation. I want to understand what that thing really is." Rodriguez sat down heavily. "No, you don't. Trust me on this. Understanding it is the first step toward joining it. The more you know about what it is, the more connection you establish with it. The more connection you establish, the easier it is for it to influence you. That's why we keep information compartmentalized. That's why the full details about Cell 237 are locked in classified files that only 3 people in the world can access. Ignorance isn't weakness, it's protection. Then how do we fight it? We don't fight it. We contain it. We maintain the barriers. We follow the rules. And we hope that's enough. Because if it's not," he gestured to the monitors, "then Protocol Omega gets activated, and everyone in this facility, inmates, guards, everyone gets evacuated. The entire complex gets sealed. And then..." He trailed off. "Then what? Then specialized teams come in to reinforce the containment. Or, if reinforcement isn't possible, to implement terminal protocols. You don't want to know what that means. I don't want to know what that means. But there are contingencies in place for worst-case scenarios." I looked at the clock. 2:13 a.m. The call buttons would activate soon. The showers would run at 3:17. At 4 a.m., I'd have to do another Victorian round. Walk past Cell 237 again. Check that lock again. Hear that voice again. "I can't do this," I said quietly. Tonight was too much. I can't. Yes, you can. Because if you walk away now, if you let it break you, then it wins. And next time, it'll be stronger. It'll know exactly how to break whoever replaces you. Every person who falls to it makes it more powerful, gives it more knowledge about human psychology, more tools to use against the next victim. You have to stay. You have to resist. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after. He was right. I hated it, but he was right. If I quit now, I'd be handing a victory. I'd be teaching it how to break people like me. "Finish your shift," Rodriguez said. "Follow the rules. And tomorrow, you'll come back and do it again. And the day after that, until either you can't anymore, or we find a better solution. That's the job. That's what we do here." He left me alone, and I forced myself to focus on the immediate tasks. At 2 a.m., the call buttons activated on schedule. I watched the monitors show empty cells, heard the buzzing, followed Rule 3 by ignoring them completely. At 3:17, the showers activated, releasing their ghostly procession. I watched them on monitors this time, keeping my distance, observing the tragedy of their eternal cycle. At 4 a.m., I gathered my courage and headed for the Victorian section. The ancient door opened with its usual groan. The corridors beyond were dark and cold, and filled with terrible history. The singing child started immediately, "Ring around the rosy." But this time, I recognized it for what it was, not a threat, but a lure. A tool designed to make me break Rule 2. I walked past without slowing, without looking, without engaging. The hollow man stood at his usual spot by the green line. Tonight, he was holding something, a uniform jacket, neatly folded. Officer Webb jacket, I realized. A trophy, a reminder. I kept my distance, gave him the respect his danger deserved, and moved on. Cell 237 waited at the end of Block F. The red door seemed darker tonight, as if the recent activity had stained it somehow. I approached with my heart hammering, remembering the voice, the offers, the psychological warfare. The lock was cold when I touched it. Not warm like Hayes had reported, but ice cold, so cold it burned. And immediately, the voice came. Back so soon. After everything I showed you, everything I offered, you still come back to check my lock like a good little guard. Admirable loyalty. Or is it stubbornness? Tell me, Evan, did you really resist me tonight? Or did you break and then forget breaking? How do you know your memories are real? How do you know the counteragent actually worked? Maybe you're still in the cascade. Maybe you never left. Maybe everything since I touched your shoulder has been a dream, and you're still standing in the control room with your eyes closed while I consume your mind piece by piece. The lock is secure, I said, testing it. Definitely locked. Definitely solid. Is it, or are you just perceiving it as secure because that's what you need to believe? What if I told you that every night, after you check this lock and walk away, I open it from the inside? What if I told you I've been free for weeks, walking these corridors, visiting the inmates, making deals, building alliances? What if I told you that the next time you see Officer Rodriguez, it won't be Rodriguez at all? It'll be me, wearing his face, giving you orders, learning your weaknesses from the inside. I pull my hand away from the lock. You can't make me doubt everything. That's your only weapon, uncertainty. But the protocols exist for a reason. The rules work. You're still contained, or I'd already be dead. Would you? Maybe I don't want you dead. Maybe I want you broken and alive, spreading doubt to everyone around you. Maybe every word you speak from now on will carry my influence, my ideas, my poison. How will you know? How will anyone know? That's the beauty of mimetic contamination, Evan. Once you've been exposed, you become a carrier, and carriers spread the disease. I walked away from cell 237, fighting the urge to run. The voice followed me down the corridor, echoing off stone walls. See you tomorrow night, Evan, and the night after, and the night after that. We have so much time together ahead of us. So many conversations, so many opportunities for doubt to grow. Sleep well. Dream of me. Dream of your mother. Dream of Claire. Dream of everyone you love, and wonder if they're really themselves or if I'm already wearing their faces. Sweet dreams, carrier. Sweet, poison dreams. I completed the round and returned to the control room. The remaining hours of my shift passed in a blur of exhaustion and paranoia. Every sound seemed suspicious. Every shadow potentially hostile. My own thoughts felt contaminated, as if I couldn't trust my own mind. At 6 a.m., Rodriguez arrived to relieve me. He looked normal, tired, stressed, but normal. But how could I be sure? How could I know for certain that he was really Rodriguez and not something wearing his face? You made it, he said, smiling slightly. Third shift of your second week. You're officially no longer a rookie. You're a survivor. How do I know you're real? His smile faded. You don't. Not with absolute certainty. But you can make educated guesses. You can look for inconsistencies, behavioral changes, things that don't match established patterns. And you can trust that if I were compromised, if something was wearing my face, the contamination team would have detected it. They check everyone who works here regularly, looking for signs of possession or influence. It's not perfect, but it's what we have. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the protocols worked, that the safeguards were effective. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and I knew it would grow. Go home, Rodriguez said gently. Get some rest. Come back tonight. We'll get through this together. I left Blackwood as the sun rose, the same golden light painting the same ugly walls. But everything looked different now. The world outside the facility seemed thinner, less solid, as if reality itself had been compromised. I drove home, checking my mirrors constantly, convinced I was being followed even though the road behind me was empty. At every stoplight, I studied the people in other cars, wondering if any of them were really people or if something had already escaped and was wearing human faces, living human lives, spreading doubt like a plague. My apartment felt strange, as if someone had been there in my absence. Nothing was obviously moved, but the air felt disturbed, the silence too complete. I checked every room, every closet, every space where something might hide. Found nothing, but that didn't mean nothing was there. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw cell 237's red door. Heard that cold voice whispering promises and threats. Felt the touch on my shoulder, that impossibly cold presence that might have been real or might have been hallucination. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Claire. Mom says you haven't called. She's worried. I'm worried. Please just let us know you're okay. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, paralyzed by uncertainty. If I responded, would I be giving the collector more leverage? If I didn't respond, would I be abandoning my family when they might genuinely need me? How could I know what the right choice was when reality itself had become questionable? Finally, I typed, I'm okay. Just busy with the new job. We'll call soon. Love you both. The response came immediately. Love you too. Be safe. 3 words that might mean everything or nothing. 3 words from my sister, or from something pretending to be my sister, or from my actual sister who'd already been replaced without knowing it. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, unable to think clearly, unable to trust anything. This was what it wanted. This was its victory. Not escape, but the spreading of doubt, the contamination of certainty, the poison of uncertainty. And I've been exposed. I've been touched. I've been marked. Tomorrow night, I'd go back to Blackwood. I'd walk those corridors again. I'd check that lock again. I'd hear that voice again. And every night after that, for as long as I could stand it. Because Rodriguez was right. Walking away meant letting it win. Meant teaching it how to break the next person. Meant abandoning the one thing standing between humanity and something older than humanity itself. So I go back. I follow the rules. I maintain the protocols. I'd resist the doubt. But lying in my bed as morning light filtered through my window, I couldn't escape one terrible certainty. The collector was patient. It had time. And eventually, inevitably, one night I'd break. One night I'd look or open the door or believe the wrong thing at the wrong moment. And when that night came, when I finally made that one fatal mistake, it would be waiting. It was always waiting. And it was very, very good at its job. Some facilities should never be opened. Some doors should never be unlocked. Some things should never be known. But we maintain them anyway, because the alternative is worse. Because someone has to stand watch in the darkness, following rules written in blood, maintaining barriers built on sacrifice. This is the job. This is what we do. This is what keeps you safe, even if you never know we're there. The end.